In the first chapter of The Gunslinger, they are in a world similar to ours. The gunslinger is chasing after the men in black and trying to get to the Dark Tower that might not even exist. And along the way, he encounters a girl named Alice. He met Alice in Tool, and he sleeps with her at first, but ends up staying with her while he was in the town of Tool. He had to kill Alice along with everyone else in Tool because they were attacking him because they were put under a spell. He also started a friendship with his kid from Earth named Jake, and he met him in the desert. He becomes partners with Jake, but ends up betraying him later in the book, and as we know, he ends up killing him. This chapter really made me want to keep reading, and I really enjoyed this book.
Alright, so for my part of the podcast, I'm going to be getting into the idea that the world has moved on in the Gunslinger. So, the world having been moved on is central to the Dark Tower series. It's like a way of describing a world that has lost its ways and where the old ways of doing things have been forgotten or abandoned. In Roland's world, technology is unreliable and often doesn't work. People have to rely on their wits, own abilities to survive. The landscape is dotted with ruins of the past, which serves as a reminder of what's lost. There's a sense of decay and decline that you see everywhere, and as though the world is falling apart. I think this concept is important because it sets up the world to both be familiar, strange, and changing. We recognize the elements of the Western genre, like the gunslinger, guns in his pistols or hip holsters or whatever. It's also mixed with fantasy. Obviously, you see magic, black magic, all that stuff, and also the post-apocalyptic elements with the desert and stuff. Obviously, in a way that creates something unique that personally I haven't seen in a book that I've read or a movie I've seen. It also serves to make Roland's quest all that more urgent. He's searching for something that may no longer exist in the world and has been forgotten in his own time. So, like I said before, the world the Gunslinger's in is a world that has moved beyond the point of no return and is almost slowly crumbling into ruin. For example, Roland himself is a gunslinger, a member of a noble order. He's the last member of this order, and he's on a quest to find the Man in Black in order to learn about the Dark Tower, which is central to his quest. His idea of a world that has been lost its way is a powerful one. It's something that I looked into, that King explores in great detail throughout the series. And while I don't think I'll get into it anytime, it's definitely something I'll keep in the back of my mind because it seems like King has a way of stringing things so as you get further and further, things you've read before start to make sense and it just clicks. And I think that's pretty interesting. I like long movie series, and this kind of feels the same way, but I feel with books you can get more in detail. We see this world of decay in the way of the characters and how they interact with each other, and in the way they approach the world around them. There's a sense of desperation, and as I keep saying, decay that permeates through this whole chapter, book, seems series. And it's something that makes the world of the Dark Tower feel unique and fascinating. Ultimately, the concept of the world having moved on, being decayed, going down, but everywhere you go, there's something different, there's something advanced, there's some Western part, is a way for King to explore certain themes, and these are the themes I think that he's trying to display. Loss, decay, like I've said before, and I believe redemption, and it's something that will continue to be important as the series progresses. So thank you.
Me and my group decided to take just parts of the chapter 1 of Gunslinger and just put them all together and for our podcast, but I just wanted to go just over many of the top topics that were discussed and that could be possibly discussed and that were probably overlooked during the book. The first one, I just want to talk about the setting, and in the chapter it established the setting of the story, which was a just desert landscape that is both familiar and alien because of the time it goes back, and then it always talks about modern day stuff, but it does, and for instance it brought up Jesus, so in the time standpoint, but it was baited in a way, in an apocalyptic type of way, but then they still were talking about Jesus, so you knew that in the time standpoint they weren't too far going. And it just talks about it was introduced in the town of Tull, which was a place of danger and mystery. Next, it was just the gunslinger himself, Roland. He was the protagonist of the story. He was introduced as a lone figure on his quest to get the Men in Black, which is the next topic. He was described as a man of few words, and he had a mysterious past, and he was relentless and determined to get to his goal, which was to reach the Man in Black. Which in later chapters they talk about why he wanted to reach the Man in Black. And the next topic, the Man in Black. The Man in Black was just pursuing the gunslinger was pursuing the Man in Black because he believes he held the keys to his ultimate goal, which was later discussed as I talked about. He said, Man in Black is described as a sorcerer who possesses great power and knowledge. That was the description of the Man in Black. Next one was the theme of good versus evil. The chapter established a theme of good versus evil, with the gunslinger representing the forces of good and the Man in Black representing the forces of evil, which I feel that would be a good topic to discuss, really, because some would say the Man in Black was good and was portrayed as good because in the book they talk about how the people in the town, they'll say he was as Jesus. They described him. I forget how they really worded it, but I'm really sure they were he's like Jesus. And then they always talked about how the gunslinger paid with gold, but yet the Man in Black paid with silver. But when they talked about the Man in Black and when the gunslinger talked about Man in Black, they always talked about how he was they talked about the Man in Black as if he was a higher power. And the gunslinger was scared of him because he knew his powers and what he had, and just the powers he had. And just the foreshadowing, the chapter contained several instances of foreshadowing, just including gunslingers and encounter with the preacher, the ominous presence of the Man in Black, hence that the story would be full of danger and mystery, unexpected twists and turns.
For chapter 1, I'll be talking about foreshadowing. So first off, the preacher. The gunslinger encounters with the preacher in Tull is a moment of foreshadowing that hints at the violence of danger to come. The preacher is depicted as a madman who has been driven by his insane religious ways. He is a symbol of the moral ambiguity that pervades the town of Tull, and his violent death is just a sign that the gunslinger is entering a world of not only darkness, but chaos as well. Next up, the Man in Black. He is a mysterious figure who appears throughout the chapter, always just out of reach, but always there. He's a symbol of the unknown and the unknowable, and his presence foreshadows the many mysteries that the gunslinger will encounter on his quest. He's also a symbol of evil, and his pursuit of the gunslinger suggests that the forces of darkness are closing in on him. Next, another foreshadow would be the desert that Roland has to go through. It's a landscape that Roland travels through, which is a symbol of the harsh and unforgiving world that he is in currently. It is a place of danger and death, where survival is a constant struggle. The world that the gunslinger's journey goes through the desert foreshadows the many challenges that he will have to face on his quest and the many obstacles that he will have to overcome as well. Next up, Roland's past. His past is mysterious and a sense of foreshadowing that hints at the many secrets that will be revealed as the story unfolds. The gunslinger is a man with a dark and troubled past. As well as his pursuit of being the Man in Black, he is driven by a desire for revenge. The gunslinger's path foreshadows the many conflicts that he'll have to go through on his quest and the many revelations that will come to light as he gets closer to his own goal. Lastly, I would say overall, the foreshadowing in chapter 1 of The Gunslinger sets the stage for a full story of danger, mystery, and just unexpected twists and turns. The chapter hints at the many challenges that the gunslinger will face on his quest, and suggests as well that the journey ahead will be full of surprises for Roland.